Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Knox Makers. It is Tuesday evening, and I'm Isaac, and I will be your host tonight. Sorry, Dodie. We have, I think, a couple of sign-ups tonight. Where's our little board? See how it is around here? So we've got several members who have graciously brought projects to show us this evening. It is our tradition to share with one another projects that we have, perhaps in progress or maybe at the finish line. They don't have to be successful. We love to celebrate when you guys get it together, but when it fails, we also want to see that because we can all learn from that. Also, if you've got something you're struggling with or just an interesting technique that you're trying out, all these things are of great interest to us, and we encourage and beg you to bring them and show them to us because we crave these things. Tonight, we're going to start the show off with Joe, who has brought extractor modification.
Here it is. Zoom out.
If you hit the W button, it'll zoom out just a little bit. The bottom right.
Too much? Well, the pictures are smaller, they'll fit. This is my extractor. You turn the crank and it spins frames with honey and slings the honey out. And this was great at first, but I got tired of turning the crank. And so I decided I needed a motor to put on it. And the company that I bought this from went out of business, Brushy Mountain Bee Farm. So I didn't know where to get the motor, but I figured I could get one on Amazon, and I did. And all I had to do was build a motor mount and a shaft. So this is what I had to mate up to from the crank. I had to duplicate that on the motor. And these are some of my parts. You can see I have a coupling and part of the shaft and some other things. So I welded this up and I got this, and you can see that's totally unacceptable. It doesn't have to be accurate, but those plates have at least got to be pretty much more parallel. So I cut it apart, and then I put this bolt through there and tightened it down, and that held everything still while I welded it. And it worked out pretty good. The shaft is made from a piece of solid stock that I turned on the mini lathe over here, and the other part that goes over the center part of the frame, I had to cut these two slots, and I cut them on the mini mill. And so I learned how to use those two things, and they're great. They're easy to use. And there it is, all set up. It's got a speed controller, because you have to start out slow, because some of the honey on one side will sling out and it'll get out of balance. And so you have to wait until it pretty much gets out all around and then speed it up. And then I took it down to Richie Willett and had it powder coated, and he charged me a jar of honey for that. It was a deal. Okay. Any questions? Yes, sir?
How do you control the motor speed?
It comes with a unit that's got a knob on it.
Is that a DC motor?
I don't know. It may have a converter in it. It plugs in.
Okay. The power thing.
I use 110 power and into the little box that controls it, and then from there to here, and I don't know what this is.
And that's mounted on top of the thing,
Yes, sir.
not on the side or the.
Yes, and I had to figure the speed this had to go because these gear, they vary. So I had to turn the crank as fast as I thought, you know, that I wanted to do it, and then count, and then calculate, and then buy a gear motor that would do that. Any more questions?
All right, thank you, Joe. That's a pretty sweet project. Hey, that stings.
That was a honey of a remark.
All right, next we got Doug, who has brought marquetry and block printing to share with us.
All right, well, tough to follow up those jokes, but fortunately Isaac will be here all night. So I hurt my back, and so I haven't been able to do a lot of the large carving projects that I had been working on, and so I decided this year that I would focus more on making images. So both with wood and then also paper, but a little bit of wood thrown into the process, as you all see. But with this first one is a piece of marquetry. So just a simple little potted plant image with a variety of different wood types, all really thin layers of wood, and with an X-Acto blade, cut them out and figure how to, I think I started with this piece here and then laid it on top of this white oak piece that's the table, and then cut the negative space out, laid it in there, then cut the top of the planter out, laid the stems in, have a little hole in this leaf. So it is just plain maple as the background. The leaves are mahogany. They have little bamboo inserts, a little hole here that I stuck the maple back into. White oak frame, white oak table. I actually don't know what this dark wood is. That's the planter. Maybe someone can identify that as it goes around. Nor this, I do know the name of this wood that forms the stems, but I can't think of it right now. So, sassafras, there we go. So, yeah, but it has finished, so it doesn't smell anymore, unfortunately. So this was a fun one, and then I'm working on a really large one. Oh, you can't pass stuff around anymore?
No, put it on there, okay,
Oh.
perfect. People can see it.
Yeah. So you can see the grain a lot better when it goes around, but I tried to alternate the grain in a way that made sense as well. So the table runs horizontally there, the front of the planter runs vertically, and then the back of the planter is horizontal. And had a lot of fun with it. Takes a surprising amount of time to come up with this little image, though. Yeah. Yeah, so
When you say thin, are you talking like shavings off a planer, or are you talking 16 feet?
About a 32nd of an inch. So pretty thin. And actually, I have some here. I'll pass a little sheet around as well. I have a box here. Yeah. So they are very thin, but not quite a shaving. They have some strength to them. So you have to be careful when you cut across the grain on soft woods because it's really susceptible to tear out and break. They're very brittle. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll pass this around, and then this is kind of a two-parter. I have also just recently started making some images with block printing. So this is not the first attempt, but the first finished attempt. And this is water-based ink, and it's just a monocolor, one-go lino cut print. So I carved out all of the negative and just wanted to play with its little bonsai tree. Just different textures and line thicknesses, line weights to make those images.
How did you carve it out?
With my wood carving chisels. It is so I have, for most of my life, been a wood carver, and it is phenomenally easier, much more easy to cut out the lino. You don't have to pay attention to grain. It just, as smooth as butter, cuts out, especially if your tools are sharp enough to cut wood. Yeah. And I'm slowly making my way through so this one is a one go. You just cut your image out, one color. So you ink up the block each time, lay the paper on, rub it around a little bit to transfer the image. And I'm trying a multi-reduction block print with oil-based paints. And so the difference is this one was water-based, and I did this yesterday, and it's completely dry, so I can pass it around and you can feel the relief of the ink on it. And with this is just the first print of what will be 4 different colors. And I printed this about a week ago, and I don't think it's dry yet. So it's gonna take a little while this is the background, and then the planter will have these white lines stay in it. And then what I have to do is cut away everything, or cut away all of the background and print my next color, the next lightest color, which is gonna be the front of the planter here. And then it'll have one large leaf coming up on the top. And then I'll carve away the planter and print the next color, which will be the back part of the planter. And then I'll cut that back part of the planter away and be left with just the leaf. And so that'll be the last color on top of everything. Yeah.
What ink are you using that takes a week to dry?
It is Caligo Safe Wash. So it's an oil-based ink, but some nice type of oil, I guess, because you can clean it up, same as water-based ink. Yeah.
So with this one, you're printing a step and then carving on the same block rather than using a series of blocks?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's reduction rather than, I don't know if there's another term for multi-block printing, but reduction, I think it was popularized by Pablo Picasso back in the day. And so you just use the same block and you progressively use your darker colors. So that way the lighter colors, all of this silver that's in these little squares here, that will all be covered, as well as this top portion, and the silver at the end will just be kind of the background rim around the whole painting. And so you progressively cut away the prior layer that you printed until you get down to just your last topmost image.
Do you have a way to make sure that your prints are all going to line up in the same way? Do you have like a frame or anything like that?
I do, and I did it 2 different ways. I actually built a little plywood jig for this one. So it has a plywood base and then an elevated L. And then on top of that, set back an inch, is another just little L of plywood. And so I can ink this up, lay it into that L, and then put my paper up against the one that's offset by an inch. And so that way, in theory, it will hit the same spot every time on the block. And then on this fellow, I just marked on a piece of plywood with tape an inch off either side, and then simply, because it was one go, I just wanted to get it more or less even on the page, just laid it down from the top carefully. So it's probably offset a little bit, but I won't have to match it up with the next layer. Yes?
How many did you make of the first cut?
Of this one?
Yes.
I want to say 8.
So you got a 1 in 8 chance, so to speak, to get it perfect.
Well, less than that, because one I will just leave as the background, to remember the process as it goes. So if everything goes well, I should have 7 finished, fully finished pieces. I should, and I will later on. But being the first and a balance of kind of figuring things out, I didn't want to waste a lot of paper, ink, and time. Yeah.
It looks extremely time consuming. I'd want more than 8 if I were you.
Yes, yes. And the nice part about, so the oil-based ink takes a lot longer to set, to dry and set, and you can print the next layer, but its open time is longer. So from what I've discovered, I was only able to print, and also saying I was only able to, this was my second one, so a lot will come with practice. But I laid out on this table here the progression, the other 4. So this is number 3 in the series, and there are 4 others. And you can see the first one, very, very light, didn't get a lot of ink onto the pad. And then this is probably the darkest, but I caught a little of the relieved background on there. Because the water-based ink, it starts to dry when you roll it out a lot quicker, and so you don't have a lot of time on the block, nor in printing a lot in your series.
Could you put the block under the...
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So there is the wooden one, and you can see this just has, I wanted to leave the lines on the planter white, and so I just used the background white rather than doing a white layer. And so everything is this silvery color except for those lines. And then with this other one, that is this. And what I did was I relieved the entire outline of it, and then I came in with the V chisel or V gouge and just did a series of different textures, really, or line directions, line thicknesses, which is really gouge depth as you go down to have each part be distinct. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. All right. Let's see.
That is just super nice stuff. It's nice to see sort of the traditional art forms represented here from time to time. And that block printing, to me, is particularly appealing. I think a workshop could come out of that. Next up, we've got Sean, who has promised to show us a board game. Board game?
So I was doing a search for obscure board games throughout history, as one does, and I found one that was called Jungle. I think the literal, it's a Chinese board game, but I think it literally means fighting animal game. And
Sounds like Jumanji.
and I saw the board, and it's basically like it may have inspired Stratego, if you've ever played that game before. And I liked Stratego when I was a kid, so I was looking at it, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And it is a fairly straightforward game, but it has some cool elements to it. And I saw the board, and the board kind of looks like a Chinese restaurant menu with the white and the red text on it. And I was like, oh, that looks really cool. And I wanted to make my own. And why print something out when you could spend several hours designing something on Inkscape instead and laser cut it? So I wanted to make a sort of travel-sized version of the game. And I went to go download the graphic of the board, and it was like really low quality and everything. So I said, I'm just going to learn how to really delve into Inkscape a little bit. I've only really sort of scratched the surface on Inkscape. And so I decided to remake it from scratch. And between this and another project I'm currently working on, these were like the first time I've actually seriously like learned how to use the functions of Inkscape. And so this was, I designed made the grid nice and even and everything. I did cheat and find some SVGs of different animals. I didn't design those from scratch. But the water, these are representative of rivers. Basically the principle of the game is to get one of your pieces in your opponent's den, and the den is surrounded by traps. And like Stratego, you have pieces that are worth a certain point value. So the elephant is 8, all the way down to the rat as 1. But funnily enough, the rat can defeat the elephant because apparently the rat can crawl into the elephant's head and eat its brain is in the rules. And there are rules as to which animals can can jump the river or go in the rivers. So it's pretty cool. And so yeah, this was just my first attempt at making it. So like actually one of the most challenging elements of this whole board were these trap tiles, because everything was in Chinese, so I wanted to remake everything in English. And I liked the shape that went around there, and trying to trace it or just use just do the lines and try to trace what was on the graphic didn't turn out well, because I was always like, my lines didn't line up perfectly, they weren't parallel, they didn't quite meet well. So I learned how to make the individual sticks and then union those and make sure that they overlapped and were in the right orientation. And then I just did it up on the laser cutter once it was up and running again, and it came out well. I think I might do some sanding to get rid of some of the char here, but I'm excited to play my first game with it because I still haven't played it yet. So I just did it a few days ago, and then I'm working on another thing that is also laser cutting, and I'm rather happy with how it came out. So that's all.
Did you have fun playing it?
I haven't played it yet. That's the thing.
You said you played it a couple days ago.
No, I just made it a couple days ago. I haven't played it yet. So yeah.
That is a fine accomplishment, sir, and I am holding your animals hostage. Inkscape can be pretty intimidating at first, at least it was for me, but Inkscape is sort of what we use to drive many of our tools here in the shop, and it is a very powerful and rewarding software to learn. Tracy teaches both a beginner and an intermediate class that's well worth it if you want to get started on that and you like that sort of learning environment. Next up, we've got Keith, who has brought a desk to show us, or perhaps images of a desk.
Images of the desk, unfortunately.
All right. So my son's been home for a couple of months waiting for a job to start, and he had a lot of time on his hands and hadn't done any woodworking. So decided to give him a woodworking 101 course and built a desk for him. So I'm going to start with the end and work our way back a little bit. So that's the final product. It is fully, it's all maple. It's got an inlay in the top. It's got an inch thick top with bevels on the bottom, tapered legs, kind of classic, maybe shaker design is where we were inspired. Oops. That's it. One of the sides folds down. It's got the keyboard pull out. He's got a drawer on the other side, so very functional, kind of exactly what he needs for his new apartment. Without the drawer. And I didn't take a lot of pictures during the build, unfortunately. This is kind of the final glue up when I finally realized, oh, I should be taking some pictures. And this is the inlay. So he's an aeronautical engineer and got our inspiration. The A is our last name, and it's kind of inspired from a sextant. So kind of a symbol of exploring and something that you use the stars to set your direction by. So he kind of appreciated that. Fortunately, once we got it on the table, people were like, isn't that kind of like the Avenger symbol? And then isn't that kind of like the Appalachian Trail symbol? And isn't that kind of like the Deathly Hallows symbol? So you can take your pick, right? So it works for everything. So, and this is a little bit different than the marquetry. This was an inlay, so the wood's a little bit thicker. Use kind of a router to do it. We use a special router that kind of half CNC, half router. It's called a shaper. Kind of nice. we also used it, the whole desk is pinned mortise and tenons, and we use the shaper to do those as well. This is one of those moments where you say, hey, look what I can do. That's the desk standing on edge. You can see that I'm putting the bevels on the underside of the tabletop. You can see the very top, maybe you can or maybe you can't, is already beveled. We have an auxiliary fence that we had clamped to the main fence in order to give us a little bit of stability there when we were doing it. It still is a little dicey, but it actually worked fairly well. No burning, no blood. We're really happy. That's it. Thanks.
Very nice. In case I wasn't clear, they don't have to be successful projects. You can bring failures up here and help me feel better about myself from time to time. That's also acceptable. And to do that, Mark is next, and he has a 3D printed sim racing button box.
Okay. Well, first I'll start by making you feel better. What do you do? This is a big mistake. But this is my first time on the mill. Really enjoyed working with it. If you were here last week, you saw this in 3D print. This is the aluminum part. That's not really what I came to talk about, but I like to make people feel good. So lots of defects on there. Check them out. Oh, and for those of you who are curious what that actually goes to, see if we can get this on here. So that little aluminum piece is underneath the sequential shifter, which is like between the steering wheel, the handbrake, and the stick shift. There's a sequential shifter in there. So when you're not using the paddle shifters or the stick or whatever, you get the idea. Okay. Let's see. And okay, my wife texted me and I didn't tell her when I got here. Nice.
You feel any better?
Do I feel better?
No, I was asking that.
Oh. Now it doesn't recognize my finger.
Well, she's got a lot of power over you.
Oh, yeah. And is that video? Is that right? Is that working? Well, first it has to recognize my finger, which I guess is sweaty. Yeah, my pin's required to. All right. What? Ah. Okay, this isn't good. So now it's telling me, is that, what in the heck? Oh, okay, let me try this. So I'm obviously unable to get into my own laptop. There we go, password instead of a pin. There we go. So now we get to see how somebody who's an electrical engineer can fail at logging into his own laptop. Yeah. Let's see here. 3, all. Did I hit the wrong one last time?
What have you got plugged in
All
there? 3.
3.
There you go. And then take the red blinky.
Oh, the tape.
You got it.
There we go. All right. I thought I had this. Okay, so for starters, you might think a button box, there can't be that much involved in a button box, but I assure you this is one of my more epic projects. All right, so this is the old button box. It was wood, all 2D thinking. It had a cup holder, so, you know, there's that. But I needed something that was a little bit better than that. It had a 64 input Bodner box. You can program it for rotaries. It handles quite a bit. I kept all of that, pulled it out of the wooden box. So I started out by modeling the vertical part that holds the direct drive steering wheel so that the button box would fit around it. And along the way, there's a lot of little sub-projects. So the first thing I wanted to do is figure out how to do labels. Now, I had just had my 3D printer for 2 months, and I was just learning Fusion 360, and so I was learning about how to do filament changes so I could get
make labels. And then I started working on rotary buttons and started trying ironing to make a nice smooth finish on top, and variable layer heights to get nice radius smooth. So these buttons are nice and smooth. There's no roughness to them at all. Then I started working on ways to clamp around the vertical face. So I started working with screws and slots where you'd insert the nut into the slot and tighten things together. So this is one of many drawings. So I started out roughing in the idea of how I might fit this thing around. I wanted it to kind of be a dash that went around. And I wanted to think more 3D, so I had buttons around corners where there's edges, and you could use the controls. This is all for VR, so I can't see any of this, and I need to be able to feel around and find out where things are. So I ended up with a clamping mechanism that fit through those holes, and it would, like a clamshell, it would go on one side, and there's a lip, and then the other side would fit inside the lip, and there'd be 9 different M3 bolts that would go into it. So this is they got a lot bigger than this. This is a 19, almost 20-hour print for just that piece that's on the print bed right there. But you can see the 2 pieces fit together. And here it is actually in place on the rig, and it holds a DIN connector for the steering wheel. So that you can see there's a slot for the cable to get in, and then it through bolts. So here it is, my first try. Now, on the left side, you can see it's kind of a mess. This is the left side. So there's too much glue on it, and you can pass that around. That's ugly as. So basically, the left side on the screen is all mucked up because I had too much glue on the bed of my printer. So I started learning to, when I was using the textured board, to clean it really well and just very lightly coat it. That was with PLA. For PETG, it's not an issue. All right, so now I figured out how to clamp it onto the rig, and I've got a basic start with wiring. The first box had a rat's nest of wiring inside, so I thought I needed to design something a little more modular. And what I came up with was I found these 90-degree ribbon connector things, and I designed something that would screw in to threaded inserts, and then it would use the slots to secure it in. So there's like little notches you can see, and this would slit, it would slide in there, and then you'd bolt it down, and then you could plug the ribbons on one side and then run the plugged in like 2mm wire in for the button side. Anyway, and so I started playing with threaded inserts, and I got another soldering iron just to take inserts for different sizes. For this project, mostly just 3 and 5mm inserts. And I practiced, experimented with different holes, and best results I found were a small chamfer and a relief, so you could get the insert started and then just melt it in. So this is some of the things I bolted onto it, baubles and accessories. So you got the phone holder and the VR headset holder. So the design's coming along a little bit. So I decided with some of the lengths of time these enclosures were going to take to print, and that large one was like over 44 hours. So I thought, you know what, I may want to change how I'm doing this over time, so maybe I should have panels that can be replaced. If I decide I want to change controls, it gives me a lot more flexibility without a whole lot of print time. So, okay, that's a start. Then you saw the labels I was doing earlier. It's like, how the heck do I get the labels on there? I want something that's flexible. So I decided to use round rare earth magnets. So I came up with a standard size that I used everywhere, and a template to guarantee the orientation of the magnets so that you could move them. I need to stop hitting that. So you could move them anywhere around the entire button box and not have to worry about it. And I also used that when I was setting the magnets inside the backs of the panels. You can also see the 3mm threaded inserts. This was a mock-up of an enclosure before I actually printed an enclosure, just making sure. There's a lot of testing along the way in this project. So then I printed a whole lot of little labels, and I would hammer them in. So I'd have the magnets fixed on the back of the template there, the master, and I would literally line them up and hammer them in to the backs of the other buttons. So anyway, probably didn't mention it earlier. I think I got this a little messed up, but there's a 12-volt power control knob in here too, and I decided since I had 12 volts going, well, why not add lighted buttons? So we're cooking with gas now. It's looking a little more realistic. You can see a lot's been added to it. So you can see the buttons on the side. There's actually like ridges and indentations for fingers so I can feel stuff in VR. You can see little black places where I decided I was going to put the magnets. And I added a replay binnacle in the upper right corner, and that's for after you finished a race, you can jump first lap, last lap, change your camera, you know, to your blimp mode or helicopter view, or anyway, there's a whole lot of different angles. Now, so far we have an idea how it's going to look in its final form, but we haven't actually done any of the real work yet. Now we get to figure out how to lay all this out. So this is the back of the main panel. And you can see I've got 45-degree bevels all the way around, and reinforcements with the 3-millimeter bolts are going to hold it to the panel, holes for the controls. There's indentations where all those little rare earth magnets get pushed into place. There's holes for the inserts to hold the ribbon cable connectors. So a lot of planning and making sure everything fits. There's a lot of iteration to get everything the way it needs. So this is what it looked like with all the mess in place, but it would have been a lot worse without the ribbon connectors. So that's kind of a coming attractions. So then I had to figure out how to lay out the interior. So the interior mostly was just how to connect it and clamp to the actual profile, but the section in the middle there with that has the 64-pin connector or input connector had a whole pile of detail in there. You can kind of get an idea. So, I mean, there's like inserts for the power and the button box and all the connectors, holes for mounting and different things. There's an access hole so I get a hex driver in place, just all the junk that has to do with assembly and routing things. Anyway, so now we're actually starting to print the panels out. You can see they've got the little angles and the slots and holes and all that good stuff. And then creating a whole bunch of little connectors, and you can see one together with little magnets in it and some screws in place, and lots of soldering. So here's the first side to side in place. It's starting to look like what I was hoping for. Radio buttons, more things. This is kind of an idea of what's going on. And this is every single part, you know, except for the rotary buttons and all the ribbon connector inserts. But you can see it's all modular, and if I want to change anything on the panels, they come off easily, and I can just unplug the ribbon connectors and not have to tear the whole thing apart, which you can see it's starting to go together now. And you can see the fan controller, and I was actually running power into this when it's lighted. And underneath the printed box is this is a coming attraction. That's one of my favorite woodworking projects under it. Okay, so we've got ribbon connectors. And I started realizing I hadn't really left myself a lot of room, because by the time I had all this figured out, actually mounting it and getting to the connections in the back of all of this mess was getting pretty difficult. But I managed. It was sheer perseverance. It was a little frustrating. So this is the high-tech enclosure from my 3D printer, just to help keep it from being affected during long prints. If the air conditioner kicked on and stuff, I didn't want it to shift or warp. So it seemed to work pretty well for me, so I just had a box on it. Prints came out real good. So these are all the parts printed out. And I'll have something about that table later. It's got a lot of interesting features in it that you can't see from this side. But, and you can see how it all fits flush. So The 45-degree angles, they suck right in there when you bolt it in. I started playing with the labels on this, and you can see that, you know, some of the sizes looked a little funny, but it fit together well. And then I started, you know, power test, make sure the fan was working and the buttons lit up. And you can see from the back, it all closes up real nice and neat. You've got a USB connector in the back, the fan connector, and the 12-volt connector. They're both insert and screw down. And then here it is, finally all complete. And I redid the replay binnacle a couple times. I ended up making it deeper, added some buttons on top because I needed some additional controls. I actually used up all but, I think I used 62 of the 64 inputs. Rotaries take additional pins. And this is a fairly recent picture. So this is in flight mode instead of racing mode. But you can see right now I've got clearance for the throttle. There was a big issue where it came down earlier. It wasn't. It was in the way. And anyway, and then when I finished all of this thing, I put it out on Thingiverse with all of the original Fusion 360 drawings and everything for people to play with. And there's a few other things out there. I've got about 40 projects, and some of them are kind of popular. You know, it's all relative, of course. This isn't anything crazy. But anyway, that is the button box. That took me 3 months to get through, and I was learning Fusion 360, learning my 3D printer, what I could do with it and get away with. Anyway, that was a mouthful. Yes?
Is there a horn? Is there a horn on your, any of this stuff?
A horn?
I've been meaning to ask you since out there.
A
I have
horn.
a million buttons for ignitions and brakes and all of that stuff. Any horns?
Horn?
Like, would it make sounds for the other people that are playing and simulating with you?
Well, you've got radio buttons to talk with them. There's a number of different ways to communicate, but I know I do not have a horn.
I don't know anything about this trade, so it just seemed like.
Now I feel like it's missing something important. Yes?
If it's a simulation.
What's that?
We're wondering if there's a cup holder, and then I saw something.
I know, like there was a cup holder, yeah.
All
a
right,
cup
so
holder,
if
cup
you
holder.
see to the side there, basically I've got a Camelback cup holder, so it's a 1 liter bottle, and then I got the extension for it, the bite tube extension, and then I've got a magnetic clip that fits on my harness, and then there's another clip behind that, so I can, while I'm racing, I can just grab it, get a drink, drop it back down, it pops back in place, and I'm hydrated. That's my.
That is more important.
That's my hydration solution. Although the most popular one is the racing glove holder, which is a very simple one-piece thing, 1 bolt. People like simple. So I have yet to see anyone else complete the button box. A lot of people downloaded it. I do not know if anyone else completed it. It was an ordeal. All right. Yes?
Did you follow your own wiring diagram, or did you find one online for all the button hookups?
I didn't. What would I? Okay.
Was it a kit, or did you have to?
I designed this from scratch. This was all, it was Fusion 360, 3D printing it and making it work. The buttons themselves were either simple switches, toggles. The radio buttons were real simple. You just had to start with an even number pin, and then you'd configure that to do, I'm trying to remember exactly how it worked, but they're not positional. It's just as you rotate it, it gets a pulse in either direction. So if you're spinning it, it'll just keep going. Yeah.
When you changed filament to go from your red to the white for your labels,
Yep.
Did you have to sit there and watch and wait for it to get to a level, or is there some way you can trigger that?
You trigger it. So in Prusa Slicer, I'm not familiar with any other slicing software. You just you go to the point, so you're able to go layer by layer, and you just drag it down to right where it is, and then you insert a filament change, and it will stop and it'll start beeping and ask you, and then you eject that and put the next filament in, and it goes on its merry way. So it worked real well.
You printed this without supports?
There was a teeny bit of support right under here. But the rest of it, 45 degrees has no problem without support. But that overhang would have just fallen all over the place. So there's a little bit of support right here. Most of the 3D prints I did had no supports. And this was there wasn't an oval, an indentation for it to fit into there. But this is a proof of concept, so. Anyway, so time for me to relinquish the podium. I think I've spent my time here, probably run over.
So in summary, it doesn't even have a horn. I thought you were serious about this whole thing. I realize it's not what you wanted me to look at, but those are some really nice 3D prints.
I didn't say I didn't want you looking at nice 3D prints.
Those are real fine. Next up, we've got Ray's mom, who is going to show off snickerdoodle cookies.
Well,
This is getting ready to be
you talked about failures. Therefore, here I am.
Let's do it.
I've only made this cookie for about 65 or 70 years. And I've never had it fail. So, it's not dangerous. I'll tell you that. And now there's a camera. The only difference is they're supposed to have gotten bigger. And they're puffy instead of flat. And therefore, they're more dry. So I couldn't figure out after all these years what I could have done wrong. So I texted Mr. Google. And he seems to think that I used too much flour. And I know I did not, because with my memory at this age, I double check everything before I put it in. So I think what it is I used an off-brand flour because gold medal wasn't available due to COVID. So Anthony said he tasted one. He said I should still bring them in. They taste fine, they're just dry. So if you care to have one, here's my failure, enjoy.
I'm sure they're lovely, but for safety's sake, I think we'd better dispose of them. Who's Anthony? Finally, this evening, we've got Ray's acquaintance, Greenho, with an undisclosed project.
Hey guys. So normally I wait until my projects are finished to show them, but today mostly I just wanted to thank everyone who has been helping in Bay 3. It's been an enormous amount of work. If you're not sure who they are, and there's honestly way too many to point them all out, anyone who looks absolutely filthy or covered in blue paint, it's a pretty good bet that they were helping on it today, so just go say hi and thank you to everyone. But because I just started on a project, I figure I might as well show it. So anyone who's been coming to these things for a while will know that I made a bed a while back. All right, next to my bed I have these two really cruddy IKEA side tables. And they look fine, but when you touch them, it kind of feels like they're made out of paper mache. So it's been on my goal for the last, 3 years to replace these things with something that looks aesthetically similar, but just better, higher quality. So I just started on it this week. So this is the first, side. So eventually it will be facing you like this, with this being either the bottom or the top, something like that. If you've seen dovetail joinery before, that's what this is. But this one's a little bit extra cool because, if you can see it, this is a mitered dovetail. So let's zoom this out. You know what a normal dovetail looks like. On a mitered dovetail, you also include a miter at one edge. And when I hand this around, you'll be able to see it too. You can see it this way. So you can see how the dovetails come right up to the edge, and then the last, that would be half tail, is a miter joint, which is really cool because I'm going to put a very large inside bevel on this, so when the front closes up, it'll come right flush. And if you didn't have that, it would just be going straight into one of your half tails, and it would look all weird like. So this one is just dry fit. I just put this together today. I can hand both of these around so you can see kind of what it looks like in the process. I do it the quote-unquote American style as opposed to the European style, which means I cut the tails first and then I use those to scribe the pins. So this gets cut, you scribe it onto that side of the board, and then chop them out, and then you get your fitment and drive them in. So this right here, again, is just dry fit. You can try wrenching it apart if you want, but it's not going anywhere. There's no glue in that yet. So it'll eventually come back apart before it goes out. When I hand this one around, just be aware that these little 45 corners are quite delicate, so if you drop them, I'll be less happy with you. That being said, this is really cool material. Let's see if you can see this. So this is quarter sawn white oak. I don't know if you can see that. I'll grab the other one. Probably show up a little bit better. So quarter sawn white oak, or quarter sawn lumber, is cut basically with every board starting on the outside of the tree on one edge, and on the other edge it's basically the center of the tree. So the grain pattern looks totally different than what you'd get on a flat sawn board. So if you go to Lowe's, Home Depot, something like that, you're looking at flat sawn lumber where you see the big kind of like swoopy things in the grain pattern. If you have two boards come together, they don't necessarily look like they match. On quarter sawn, you get not only the longitudinal grain, which runs up and down the tree, so that's what brings water and nutrients from the roots all the way up to the leaves, but you also get the medullary rays that show up, and the medullary rays is the grain that runs from the outside of the tree to the center. It's also what brings the nutrients into the center, which causes the pores to plug up, which kills the center of the tree, which gives you the color that you actually see in your heartwood. In red oak and white oak specifically, I'm going to turn the lights off. I think that might show up better. Maybe. You'll see it when I send this around though. It'll look quite tiger striped, and the tiger striping, those are the medullary rays that you are seeing at the surface, and I just think it looks really pretty. So this is white oak, so this is what they make like whiskey barrels out of, stuff like that. I think it looks a whole lot better than red oak. Red oak smells like mold and fungus when you're cutting it. White oak isn't much better. I think it smells like cat pee, but you can check it out for yourself. Anyways, this is my thing. Again, thank you to everyone who's been helping out. I really appreciate you.
Okay, now you made me feel better. Even Greenhoe has some IKEA in his house, at least for the moment. So that is the end of our sign-ups. Did anybody else bring anything nifty to show us that did not sign the paper? No? Yes?
This is a blend project, if you will. So a few weeks ago, my grandson said that he got a vest because he was going to a formal affair. But the pocket wasn't open for him to put the little hanky in. It's sewn shut, Grammy. Can you come over and fix it for me? I'm sure. So I packed up all my sewing tools. I was going to go over and fix it with the seam ripper. Those of you who sew know what that is. Got over there and realized I left all my sewing tools at home, not with me. So it was time to improvise. So much like right now, I should have brought a seam ripper with me so I could put it on here to show you what I used to seam rip, but it's over in Fiber Arts. So do any of you have an idea of what tool I improvised with to do my seam ripping? The tines of the fork work really well to get in there and pull the threads. So if nothing else, you have a fork if you need to ever do some seam ripping. That's it.
There's that hacker spirit. That's awesome. So we've got a couple of classes coming up that I just want to mention. On Saturday, March the 12th, MIG Welding 101. These are greatly in-demand classes. We've got 3 tickets left as of now, I believe. So if you're interested in learning MIG welding and getting certified to do that stuff here in the shop, this is a tremendous opportunity for you. Again, that's Saturday, March the 12th. It's going to be 4:30 in the afternoon. And then also, sort of following up on that, March the 19th, we've got TIG Welding 201. So that's a level 2 class. And there are, as of this moment, 5 tickets remaining. So that's also a Saturday starting at 1:30 p.m. Our events are always advertised on our website calendar, knoxmakers.org/events, and that's where you would go to buy tickets for these kinds of things when they come up and become available. Let us know in the individual zone channels or speaking to the czars and czarinas what kinds of classes you're interested in, what kind of programming you'd like to see. And when they come up, be sure to snap them up because we don't know when we'll see these classes come around again. You know, demand is what drives this stuff. We're all volunteers here, so mutual support, yeah? Finally, I'll just mention that coming up on March the 20th is our next board meeting. Board meetings are still happening virtually, so we'll be posting a link to the general channel if you want to hang out and witness the board things live. Then that will be at 2 on March the 20th. That's Sunday. Finally, just to reiterate what Brian was saying, we've been in tremendous upheaval lately, you know, having taken over this new bay, trying to get that bay ready for occupancy, and then, of course, rearranging everything. So appreciate everybody's tolerance while we've had the workshop in this crazy state, and definitely appreciate everybody who's kicked in some labor. If you've got time and availability, it would be amazing if you could kick in as well. Talk to a czar's arena of your choice. Look for opportunities to help out. It's how all this stuff happens. So get involved and meet some folks, hang out. It's a good time. So that's it for this evening's official program. We're now going to move out in the workshop. We're going to make some crazy stuff, hang out, have a good time. Thanks everybody for coming tonight.